Hi knitters, it's Louise here from Wildflower Wool and welcome back to my channel. I am all set up here to talk to you about the fun of double knitting. This is the first in a series of videos that's aimed at the beginner double knitter, and I'm going to walk you through all the different techniques that you will need to start your very first project. This video is going to cover exactly what double knitting is, and then I'm going to show you how to do a two-colored long tail cast on that'll work great for your first project. So, what is double knitting? Sometimes people get the term double knitting confused, thinking that maybe what we're talking about is that we're going to knit with a double strand of yarn. While we're using two colors for our two-color double knitting, we're not going to hold the strands together. I like to hold one strand in each hand. You can hold them two colors in each finger, just as if you would do for stranded knitting. The other thing, DK, double knitting. Sometimes people think that that stands for DK weight of yarn. And while double knitting can certainly be done with a DK weight, it doesn't mean that it's referring to the weight of yarn. You can use variety. Fingering weight works up beautifully in double knitting. I'm using worsted weight here for my samples. So you can use whatever you want. We'll talk a little bit more about needle size and gauge in future videos. But we'll talk here exactly what double knitting is. I'm going to show you my sample here. Then I've got yarn and needles here, and we will practice the cast on. So double knitting, so it's not about how we're holding the yarn or the weight of yarn, but what double knitting is actually we're working a double layer of fabric. As we're knitting across one row, we're knitting the front side of our work and the back side. So on this sample here, I've got my main color is gray and I have a yellow daisy, yellow flower. When I switch it over, this is the exciting part. Look at this. My colors have reversed. Yellow is now my background color and the gray has turned into the color of the flower. And this is what double knitting is. I have two completely separate pieces of fabric. I have a front side and a back side, and they are worked together in reversible colors. So there really is no right or wrong side to double knitting because there is no purl side. Typically that wrong side of stockinette, that is hidden in between the center of these two fabrics. So there is no right or wrong side. We just have what I like to refer to as a front side and a back side. And that is just really depending on whatever side you're ready to work on. My needle point is here. If I was ready to work across this side, my gray side would be my front side. When I got to the end of this row and I turned it around, and if my needle point was here and I was ready to work back, this time my yellow would be my front side and the gray would be my back side. So the front and back is just referring to the side that you're looking at. And that is it. So this is super fun. It is squishy and warm and extra thick, and you can make really anything out of double knitting that you would want to. You can do hats, scarves, cowls, mitts, socks, blankets. Anything lends itself to double knitting. So in future videos, we will get into all the fun techniques and little tips and tricks and ways to fix your any little problems that may come up. We'll talk about color changing, we'll talk about edge stitching, we'll talk about how to actually work the double knitting in the main body of your work. And you can see here, you can see some of these little blips in my knitting, and then see how up here those have disappeared. I'm going to give you that little trick in probably the next video. So this one is just, we're going to talk now all about the cast on edge. Now that you know what a double knitting fabric is, we'll look at it this way so you can kind of see the reversible side. It is really fun. So if you want to grab some needles and some yarn and work along with me, that would be fantastic. I have just grabbed, because we're not working on a project yet, that will come in future videos, but right now this is really just about casting on a small square and just getting the rhythm of how double knitting is knit. I've got two contrasting colors of worsted weight yarn, and I have a matching needle. I think I have a 4.5 millimeter needle, and white and blue. You want something that has a high contrast. I would not suggest working with two colors of the same or two shades of the same color. You want your colors to be as distinct as possible to set yourself up for success. So what we're going to do is we're going to cast on, and we're going to start the 2-color long tail cast on. There are a variety of ways that you can cast on for double knitting, but I like showing this one to my students and having them work with this one first. In future videos, we will show how to cast on with one color, and then you can pick and choose for yourself what you like the best, what you find the easiest to work, what you think will work best for the project you have in mind. But there's a couple of reasons I like long tail cast on to start with. First off, a lot of knitters are already familiar with this cast on, so it's just one less thing that you need to worry about learning. And the main reason though is when we're setting up our color using the long tail 2-color cast on, it sets us up for our first row of double knitting, and we can see the colors we're going to work. So let's start. Long tail cast on. Doing this 2 colors, because we've got 2 working balls, we don't need to typically pull out, as we typically would, that great big long length of yarn to work our stitches with. Because we already have 2 strands coming right from the ball, these working strands are going to take the place of that great big long tail cast on. I have made a slip knot. I've just left a long enough tail to comfortably put it on a darning needle and weave it in at the end of the project. We're not going to be using this for anything, so I'm just going to hold it up here with the needle out of the way. I have made a slip knot, but we're not going to count this slip knot in our stitch count, and we're not going to knit it. It will be pulled off and pulled out before we start working our first row, or at the end of the first row. Either one is fine. So to get the 2-color long tail cast on, we're going to be alternating colors. I'm going to be putting on a white stitch and a blue stitch and a white stitch and a blue stitch and just working those across my needle. I'm going to grab both strands into my palm with my pinky, my finger and my thumb come in and each grab a strand of yarn. The color that is on my finger is going to make the colored stitch that will appear on the needle. So I'm going to come up here now. I'm going to make my first cast on stitch, and it's white. White on my finger equals white stitch on the needle. Now, because I'm alternating them, I want a blue stitch. So that means I'm going to twist my yarns. I'm going to bring the white yarn down and the blue yarn up. I now have, oops, I got to hold those both in. I've got the blue yarn on my finger, which means that will make a blue stitch on my needle. I want to alternate. Now I want to white, so that means I'm going to drop the blue down, pick up the white, and I will make another cast on stitch, and it's white. I'm going to bring the white down, pick up the blue, move it up to my finger, make another stitch, and it will be blue. Blue yarn on my finger equals a blue yarn on top. The white, or whatever color is on the bottom thumb, that color is going onto the bottom on that chain under our cast on edge. So we're just going to keep twisting. We always want to keep twisting the yarns in the same direction because that makes the chain on the bottom stay consistently the same direction. Twist and put on another stitch. Now, if you were to get interrupted as you were casting on, and if you came back and picked up your work and you thought all of a sudden you thought to yourself, oh shoot, what am I doing? What color is next? What yarn goes on which finger? Look at the stitch that's last on the needle. I've got a blue, so that means the last time I was holding my yarn, the blue was over my finger because that's the color stitch it made on the needle. So I know this time I need to twist my yarns, have the white on my finger, so I can get a white stitch on my needle. The only downfall to this cast on is that the yarns do get twisted. Because we're twisting them with every stitch, it does get our yarn a little bit twisted. So if you're casting on a large number of stitches. At some point, you're going to want to, maybe partway through your cast on, untwist your yarns or dangle this to let it untangle. Somehow you're going to want to just untangle those yarns and then carry on, or you may be able to get your cast on finished and then just untangle them, ready for the beginning of your first row. So now, just for sake of time, I am only going to cast on 12 stitches. Now I haven't been counting, so let's just do a quick 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. Okay, I need a blue. 12. I want an even number of stitches. Because we're working a double-sided fabric, we want to have an even number of stitches because they're going to be kind of thought of as pairs. A white and a blue, a white and a blue, a white and a blue. So the white is going to be one side of our work, the blue is going to be the opposite. The white is going to be one side, the blue is the opposite. So obviously we need an even number because we need the same number on the front and the back. So depending on what side, how wide, how many stitches you're going to want for your project. So if you're casting on a pot holder or a scarf and you decided, we'll just pick 20 stitches. You want your scarf to be 20 stitches wide, you would have to cast on 40. You always double the number of stitches that you want for the width of your project. Because like I just said, half of these stitches are for the front side of our project, half of them are for the back side. So for my little project here, I'm just going to make it 6 stitches wide, which means I will need to double that. I will need to make it 12 because I will need 6 white stitches for the front of my project and I will need 6 blue stitches for the back. 6 plus 6 equals 12. So that's what I want to cast onto my needle, not counting that slip knot because we're going to get rid of that. And we can get rid of that right now if we want to. I've got a circular needle, so just to make sure that I don't knit with it or it doesn't confuse me when I get to that first row of knitting, I can slide it off and undo it, and it doesn't bother the rest of my stitches. Now, if you are knitting with a straight needle and you would have the end of the straight needle here, you wouldn't be able to slide it off. You would just turn your work around, and as you worked across the first row, once you got to knit the last stitch and your slip knot was there, then you could slide it off your needle and undo it, and it will be gone. So right now, if we're looking at our stitches, this is how we want our stitches to look. We want them to be alternating colors. We've got blue, white, blue, white, blue, white, blue, white, blue, white, blue, white. If you had 2 blues side by side or 2 whites side by side, I would take that off and do that again. Because throughout our whole project, we're always going to be looking at our stitches alternating. Except when we get to a color change, but that'll be a couple videos down the road. But this is how we want it to look. So if you're doing this at home, you can decide how you can cast on 12 stitches, or if you want to put on another multiple of an even number of stitches and work along with me, that would be fantastic. I'll give you another little tip about casting on. And this is something you're not going to know until you've done a few rows, until you've got a little bit of practice. You may want to cast on with a smaller needle size. If you look at my pot holder down here, I typically am a loose knitter, and I find that with my double knitting, when I cast on and I'm working a project flat, that sometimes I kind of think that this bottom seems to flare out just a little bit. So to counteract that flaring out of your work, you can cast on with a smaller needle size, and that will help these ends just kind of snug in a little bit. Now this one I didn't. I don't know if I mentioned, but this one here, this project here is going to have a lot of good examples of what to do and what not to do, or things that you could change on it. So we'll be referring back to my little flower, my little daisy dish or pot holder quite often as we go through these videos. But that is it for the first video. I just wanted to explain exactly what double knitting is and show you how to do that cast on. We've got alternating stitches, we have an even number of stitches, and we've already removed our slip knot. And we are ready to work our first row, and that will be coming up in the next video. We will talk about how to work those edge stitches and how to work the knits and purls to make a double knit fabric. So I hope that you've enjoyed this. I hope maybe it's inspired you to pick up your needles and knit along with me. And I hope to see you in the next video when we continue working our little sample project. So I would love it for you to leave me a comment. Let me know if you've double knit before, if you've made, if you've knit a project before, if you've heard about it before. Anything, any comments about double knitting, I would love for you just to put them down below and hit that subscribe button and the like button, and then you will get notified when the next videos are ready to watch and we'll knit on together. So I will see you in the next video. Bye.